All right. Good morning, everybody. My name is Carrasco. Hope everybody's awake. I'll get there in a few minutes, so just bear with me. So my name is Carrasco. I've been in the cloud computing industry before it was called the cloud, right? And that's probably before the dot-com bubble days, so just to date myself. But I'm currently a cloud advisor for Tapjoy. Tapjoy is a mobile marketing company who has well over 550 million devices and users connected to their cloud at any given time. And we've just finished architecting it in such a way that it will reside on both private and public infrastructure, right, simultaneously, right? And so I'm going to share about the lessons that we've learned, the issues we've seen in the market right now in regards to the way that OpenStack is perceived. I'm not going to get technical with you guys. Everybody here probably is fully aware of the technical issues, and that's probably for a different conference. We won't have enough time to talk about OpenStack's bugs. But I will talk about it from a more high-level perspective of why most OpenStack installations or deployments or evaluations also fail. I'll talk about a big issue that I'm really seeing that can really help boost the cloud movement. And finally, it's not going to be all doom and gloom. I'll try to help provide some solutions. So the general gist of this is I want to start a conversation, right? I think we're at that point where we really should be looking at other things at a higher level and see how we can get the cloud to move forward, right? So let's start with the first issue I see that's fairly common. We forget that we need to leave our dogma at home, right? And what do I mean by dogma? Not your dog. Dogma is a set of views or beliefs that we take to be as facts. We accept them both either in our group of community of engineers, or we accept them as hardened in stone facts that cannot be changed, right? And we base our beliefs on that in terms of dogmatic views. But the thing is it's not for you guys here. Nobody has dogmatic views. It's for those people who didn't make it to the conference, right? So, and over the years, how have we developed dogmatic views? Well, I'll tell you how I've developed and how my teams have developed over the years. Dogmatic views is usually the first reason is bad experiences, right? And so in the case of OpenStack, well, we tried OpenStack back in 2011, and it crashed and was not ready for prime time. And frankly, it wasn't. But you go forward a couple of years, and it completely evolved into something different. You go forward to 2016, and it's really, really rock solid. It's got its problems. It's not for every business model, but it's really rock solid for so many other applications out there. So now, the other reason is what I call 3 a.m. PTSD, right? And what do I mean by that? Well, I used to get called, these are dot-com bubble days. I used to get called at 3 o'clock in the morning and woken up at 3 o'clock in the morning. And till this day, I have nightmares of those days, right? And so that caused me to really look into high availability, distributed computing, and what we are now using as the basis of the cloud. I started using Linux at a very early time. One of the first startups I was in the early 90s, late 90s, they were using Linux as inside embedded devices, and for me, it was game-changing, right? Nobody even heard of Linux, and yet alone embedded Linux devices, right? And so that was the inception of what we have today in our pockets many times, right? And so if I had not given Linux the opportunity it needed, or gone back and figured out a way to make it more resilient and more powerful, it wouldn't have, I wouldn't be speaking at the stage today, to be frank, right? And so I'm glad I didn't let my dogma views of Linux dominate my future views of Linux. So, and the last two are rebranding. We see this in marketing. A lot of vendors will grab an old they'll grab an old technology and rebrand it as new, or they'll grab a new technology and rebrand it as old. And neither time is it the same technology. And when we go into and try it out, we have a poor taste in our mouth with that experience of that technology. And then when we see the real technology, we just dismiss it, thinking that it isn't, it's not ready for prime time or it's not good for your business, right? And that happened with the virtualization movement. That happened with even the bare metal movement. And then we bring those ideas into the OpenStack environment, and we've already have these preconceived notions, right? And so I'll keep moving on. The next reason that I see out there is FUDD, right? What do I mean by FUDD? Well, I don't mean Elmer Fudd. I mean the views that are promoted on the internet as fear, uncertainty, doubt, and doom. Again, dating myself a few years, when Linux first came out, there was a huge FUDD campaign against it. The dominant operating system of the time was propagating or disseminating negative information or false information or just scare tactics that your world was going to end if you used Linux, right? And so it was in independently published articles and promoted by commercial entities, et cetera. Well, guess who won that war, that FUDD war, right? OpenStack would not be here if Linux did not win, right, and become fully accepted. And the world did not end, it actually became a better place, right? And so the same thing I see happening with OpenStack. There's a lot of articles starting to come out there saying the end of OpenStack is right around the corner. And every year, there's been articles promoted in that manner and we haven't seen it. In fact, these conferences keep growing, and they are only going to be growing even bigger. So they're not here. OpenStack is not here to die. OpenStack is here to grow. It will evolve. It may not be the same one, OpenStack that we're used to today in 5 years, but it's moving forward. All right, next reason. You guys picked the wrong trunk. I've done it, right? Basically, we go to openstack.org. We go to, as engineers, as tech people, what do? We go to a website, hit the download button, and try out a piece of software, whether it's Linux, whether it's an open source piece of software, whether it's the next popular thing that everybody's telling you need to try. We do that. We go to the website. So this is not so much a fault on engineers. This is more a fault on, frankly, OpenStack Foundation. We go to openstack.org. We grab what's on there. Yeah, there's a few little warnings here and there. It says, you should really be using somebody else, but you could also be doing this with another provider. You should really maybe use a commercial provider, and this is what other people do. But there's no real clear path. There's no quick path. And so we try OpenStack, we get the trunks, and all of a sudden we have a terrible experience. Why? Because the trunks are not really all pre-configured. There's a lot of tweaks that need to happen. There's also community Linux trunks out there that do help you, but there still requires a level of expertise. So it's we have to be careful how we try OpenStack, right? And then the next reason I keep seeing out there is there's a lot of people who are being told they're full stack engineers. I know I'm ruffling feathers here today, so just bear with me. If I haven't hit one of your feathers yet, just wait a few more slides. I probably will. Full stack engineers are actually myths, right? And why do I know they're myths? Because I've worked the entire stack and I'm not a full stack engineer. It's really difficult to be an expert or be proficient in every realm of the stack, right? Just being a full stack engineer in your software stack is a monumental effort and very difficult. Trying to be a full stack engineer, both on the hardware level all the way to network security, storage, etc., it's a very difficult and hard task. And so we have to be careful who tries OpenStack or who's the initiator in your organization who's trying to get OpenStack running. Do they really have the skill set, right? And I'll talk more about that later on. But essentially, we have to be careful to realize that we don't have those skills the entire time. We could be proficient in a particular area of technology for a few years, but then we move on. You blink, and that technology changed, right? So what you knew 2 years ago is completely obsolete. And so that's why it's really difficult to be a full stack engineer. Next reason. You thought OpenStack was a better buggy for your horse, right? OpenStack is not a better buggy. It's a complete paradigm shift, right? It's not, we're not trying to be a better hypervisor. We're not trying to be a cheaper alternative to your virtualization suite. We're not trying to be the cheaper way of doing something, or the open source way of doing something. It's an entire movement. Yes, it has the software projects attached to it, but it's actually very different. The OpenStack methodology, at least from my point of view, and the way I'm seeing it adopted, is really we're shifting. And the shift has not completed yet, so it's still evolving, but it's a complete shift of data center technologies and the way that we view data centers and the way we view infrastructure, right? And here's the key part. We have to understand. Sometimes you have IT assets and sometimes you have cloud assets, and they're not always combined and they're not always the same. So we have to keep that in mind. All right. Another reason I see, again, these are not in order of importance, so just trying to start a conversation, is you did it all by yourself. That's me at 3 a.m., by the way. So you guys used the wrong team, right? And what do I mean by that? Well, you probably either did it by yourself, like me at 3 a.m., or you had a very small team who was not ready to deploy a data center technology. Yeah, it's a cloud, but it's still a data center technology, right? And so data center technologies are tough. They can be really hard, very difficult to manage, and if it's your first time around with it, it's going to be a challenge, right? And so you have to figure out, did I choose the right way of doing this? And if not, there's a whole bunch of other methods of getting help, right? But don't do it by yourself, right? If you're going to go alone, very likely it's going to be a tough endeavor for you. So on that same realm of teams, is your company really ready for OpenStack, right? There's a lot of companies that go out and try OpenStack, and they weren't really ready. They weren't at the right stage of the company to be using OpenStack. An example is a company who's trying to do an MVP. They probably have 3 MVP projects, minimal viable products. They try out a few iterations of a product. They're trying to see if the market's going to like their product. And it makes no economic sense to go out and hire a cloud team, to go out and buy hardware, to go out and get data center contracts and start racking all their stuff. It just really doesn't make sense. So you have to be careful what stage you're at, right? But on the other hand, who is OpenStack really great for? And I'm not saying these are the only companies, but these are some companies out there, companies that are born online. So maybe your MVP is just going to be purely online, right? Are you going to be a purely online company? Maybe you should have that strategy from day one. Maybe you could still go on the public cloud, but just make sure you don't get locked in, right? So that you can eventually be able to use OpenStack, right? Or you're a company who's already on the cloud and you want to move, who's not on the cloud, but you are moving to the cloud. Well, that may be great for you as well. And then finally, it's for anybody who really wants to stop doing things the old way. We're trying to shift our thinking from trying to build better buggies, and we're trying to move into the next generation cloud, right? So it's the next company who wants to move forward in a different way, who's really committed and engaged to do that. That's probably great, an ideal fit for OpenStack. All right, so enough doom and gloom. Again, if I haven't hit your feather or offended you, just wait a couple more slides. I got a couple more coming in here. But solutions. What do I have that I can come up with solutions? Well, one thing is I keep asking is, I ask companies, I advise a few different companies in the cloud area, and I ask them, where's your cloud officer, right? We have, for finances, we have the chief finance officer. For product, chief product officer. For security, chief security officer, and so on and so forth, right? Where are the cloud officers, right? You've made a multi-million-dollar investment in your cloud, and it's a side project of some team who's already fully at full capacity, right? That is a recipe for success. Guess what happens to clouds who aren't taken care of, who become orphaned? They get vaporized, right? They become security risks, they become a headache, and nobody wants to work with them, and all of a sudden they just vanish. They get wiped out and repurposed. And so a cloud officer, manager of cloud, head of cloud computing, chief cloud cook and bottle washer, whatever you want to call them. There's a person who has to own your cloud and your cloud initiatives, right? And again, most companies don't have cloud initiatives. Your cloud guy, your head of cloud, will have the right cloud initiatives and bring your business in line with those initiatives, right? Or vice versa, bring those initiatives in line with your business objectives. And a big thing is that your cloud officer will protect your cloud and know that it's your asset and not somebody else's asset, right? And what do I mean by that? They'll prevent lock-in, right? And we'll talk more about this in the next few slides, which leads me to the next step. This is probably one of the bigger issues that I keep seeing out there, that if we can fix this, the cloud space is going to quadruple in size. So we need vendors, right? There's a lot of vendors here today. What do I mean by we need vendors? Well, we need vendors to get their heads out of their clouds. So right now, private and public, so this is not just the public guys who are out for profit. We're talking about private, and not just the OpenStack community, but in general, there's a lot of vendors out there. We're all fighting for this, fiercely fighting for this small sliver of territory. And everybody's looking for creative ways of locking us in to their service, their cloud technology, software, whatever it may be, right? And nobody's coming up with real creative ways. Oh, there is a few companies out there, but there's very few companies coming up with not coming up with creative ways of letting us out. So you can check into your hotel, but you can't leave. So how do we solve that? Well, let's look at the bigger picture, right? So get private, public, container, virtualization, you name it, everybody. And then let's change our way of looking at it and converge it completely and say, now, let's look at your cloud, your asset, and let's go ahead and have options to run our cloud asset, our IP, and run it across whoever we want to run it with, whoever we want to choose to power it with. So it's not about cloud, public cloud versus private cloud. It's about who we want to power our cloud, right? And so in order for that to happen, I think OpenStack could be the center and be right in the middle to orchestrate that this particular methodology, right? That I think is the future. And so I'll give you some examples too in the next few slides. By the way, niche providers, we've seen it. There's a lot of companies just offering a particular service that can plug right into your cloud and offer you something that public or private clouds are not offering right now. So we see this evolution right now happening, right? And I think the next step is to be able to take control of your cloud and be able to run it wherever you want, whenever you want. So what is this called? I'm calling it the hyperconverged cloud. Not the hyperconverged infrastructure. It's not about hardware. It's not even about technology. It's way beyond that. It's above all that. Just let's bring it together and make sure that people can own their asset that's deployed across multiple different clouds simultaneously. And I know it can be done because I'm doing it right now. I've architected a cloud that runs across both public and private resources. I've actually done a few of those already, and it consumes whatever resource we want, and it's a truly portable cloud, right? But we did it in such a way that we weren't allowed to be locked in. Now, everybody doesn't have those resources or doesn't have that knowledge base in-house, right? And so that's why it's important that all the vendors get together and create standards, which goes to my next slide, and help make this a reality. We can't make the converged cloud a reality until we have standards. And how do I know standards are going to be the key? Right? And I'm not talking about API standards. API standards could be part of it, right? It could be a component of these standards, but I'm talking about interoperability standards. And I know that it works because if you look at the PC industry, right? So let's go back in time a little bit and look at other technologies. PC industry, the key ingredient for its success was standards. When competitors were able to get together and build components for motherboards, for other competitors' motherboards, actually, the industry grew and exploded. And we saw the PC revolution happen because now all these competitors are selling to manufacturers or to individuals, and just the landscape and the territory and the market share grew exponentially. So everybody originally was fighting for that little piece of sliver. Now it grew, right? Same thing with the internet, right? Those people watching online couldn't be able to watch us online if we didn't have streaming standards, right, that have emerged over the last 10 years, and so forth and so on, right? So I know for a fact that if we have standards, it's going to help make your asset, your cloud, a actual reality, right, rather than decrease the size of the market. It's going to increase the size of the market. But I've also heard people say, we're too late for these standards, right? And I'm like, well, how do we know we're late in a particular industry? Well, we measure it, right? How big is it? How big is the size of this industry? Well, I went back and I started looking at the size of the market. By the way, all the reports say one share, 30 million, another says 100 million, 80 million. So let's just put it under 100 billion, my apologies, $100 billion a year in revenues, give or take, right? Well, when I did that, I saw the cloud industry is still really small. How do I know that? Because you compare that to the rest of the tech industry, and it's much bigger, right? You compare that to other industries, and it's completely a little tiny speck on the radar. Even though we're talking about billions of dollars, there's trillion-sized economies out there, right? The top 10 pills sold in the U.S. dwarf the entire market share of the cloud computing industry, the Googles, the Amazons, the OpenStacks, the Dockers, et cetera, all combined. They just dwarf it. So we're early, right? It's so early. It's not too late. So my proposal is we stop building buggies or a better buggy. We stop trying to copy somebody else's APIs, stop trying to copy what the previous virtualization vendor did, and let's just really focus on making a better cloud. And let's focus on making the next generation cloud. Thanks for your time. So.